Rodrigo Seda. He has a master's in economics from the University of Chicago, a master's in applied macroeconomics, commercial engineer from the Pontificia Universidad Católica of Chile. I think he is someone we're all familiar with. His performance in the public sphere is very prominent and well known as well. So we now give the floor to the minister. Hello, I'm Rodriguez Cerda, Minister of Finance of Chile. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to address you during this virtual conference. We wish it could be in person, but unfortunately today most of our conferences are online. But it's important to talk about pensions. We talk about many topics, but our countries are aging and it becomes a more and more important topic, and governments need to take it into account. I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues from the IDB for inviting me to this conference. Also, I'd like to extend my greetings to the colleagues who have spoken before me. And also, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for their wonderful presentations. I'll talk a little bit about pensions in Chile now, and I also want to mention some aspects of what is happening with the pandemic, which has meant that some of the savings that we had for pensions have been withdrawn at several different times during the pandemic, and this has had an important effect and will have an important effect on the future. It also an important impact on the economy, which we need to take into account. And it's important to realize that our pension is made up of different pillars. One of them is the mandatory savings by individuals pillar. We also have a factor that's been significant, which is the pandemic. Can these funds be used not for pensions, but for other purposes during the pandemic? And unfortunately, this is affecting not only the pensions, but also the economy. So this is what I wanted to tell you about, and also what we can do to deal with this type of risk in the future. I'll share my screen if you agree. I'd like to start by describing the situation in Chile. We have an aging of the population that has been rapid and will continue to speed up. Here we look at a chart from 1950, and then 70 years later, you see a pyramid where the base, the young people, was very wide. Now we see that it's middle-aged people that are the largest part of the pyramid. And then by 2100, we see what the population pyramid will look like. So many people in retirement age. And this is the great challenge that we have ahead of us. That's why it's so important to think about pensions and how we can provide pensions that are sustainable and self-financing. Self-financing, because unfortunately what happens as well is that people's efforts are not always reflected in future pensions, and it needs to be the case. In Chile, we have a system consisting of 3 pillars. One we call the solidarity pillar. The pension system here seeks to alleviate poverty in old age. And this is financed through tax revenues, the general tax. We have the solidarity system in Chile. It's a basic solidarity pension, and there are also complementary contributions to people's pensions when their pension is low. That's the pension, the solidarity pension that provides some complementary help. And we have two other additional pillars. The mandatory savings pillar, it's based on individual savings. Each person saves for their old age. They save during the time that they're economically active. They pay 10% of their salary. And then there's another pillar, which is voluntary support. And this was quite strong during a period of time and generated considerable savings. Near 1990, it was quite considerable, the amount that had been saved. And this also had a macro effect. As we have more savings, this allows us to have more savings available within our economy. And this can be used for loans to people in the economy at rates that, as we have larger amounts that are saved, those rates decrease. That is the situation that we had at the time.
We also have a pillar for non-mandatory savings, where individuals can add additional funds and they get tax incentives to do that, and that can increase the amount in pensions going forward. In Chile, what we saw was that when it comes to coverage, particularly in the solidarity pillar, that increased significantly. We have seen the increase from 2008 to now, where now we have about 1.7 million people in 2021 contributing, which is an increase of the number threefold. We can see on the right the effective expenditure and how that also significantly increased. One, because of coverage, but also starting in 2019, you can see that there was another significant increase, and that is because the solidarity pensions, the pensions reaching the most vulnerable, also considerably increased, almost by 50%. The goal here was to improve pensions for all. That was part of a major effort starting in 2019. What we started to see was that, in a way, we were trying to enhance pensions. And here it was by focusing first on the solidarity pensions to improve pensions for the most vulnerable. But we knew that we had a road ahead of us still. And so that means that we need to continue to improve conditions and pensions for the middle class as well. For the middle class, there's a lot of a major component of these pensions that come from the mandatory savings. This has to do with savings during their working life, and then when they retire, they can opt into annuities and different pension options. This again has to do with the mandatory pillar. Now, this is an issue that we had here during the pandemic, but something that we need to be thinking about, particularly in all of our systems, so with individual and mandatory savings. Essentially, what it states is that these mandatory savings were continuing to go up, but when the pandemic struck, especially at the initiative of Parliament, it was possible to actually withdraw from those savings. So far, 3 of these retirement withdrawals have been made, which has decreased savings in 10%. In other words, when somebody pulls 10% of their savings from here, we are talking about a reduction in 30% of their balance. So we see that there was a drop in close to 32.5% on average for savings, which also means that pensions are dropping at a similar rate. This has led to a reversal of the progress we had made, in some fairly significant. As we saw in pre-pandemic studies, you need to work and contribute for 7 additional years, for 10 years of pensions. Right now, what we also see is that you can only benefit from this early withdrawal if you continue to contribute and have employment. This means that there are a number of folks who have seen a significant decrease in their savings, which is going to turn into an even bigger decrease in their pensions. As a percentage here, as of August 2020, we see that we had a little bit above 80% of GDP, and as of October 2021, this was at about 60% of GDP. And this is a pretty sharp drop in savings. This sharp drop also means that the amount of funds available has also gone down for the savings market to then be lent to other individuals. It's important to understand what this all means. With the first withdrawal from these pension funds, which started prior to the start of the pandemic, we have here the employment indicator, which showed a decrease of close to 13%. The number of employed people was at about 7 million workers, which was low because we had an increase in unemployment to 13%. We had lost 2 million people from the workforce. And there were a number of folks who couldn't leave home but couldn't continue working, and all because of COVID. In that scenario, that is a context where these withdrawals started. As we see, the first withdrawal happened within that context. Right now, we're looking at the fourth withdrawal, but that unemployment level is no longer dropping. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. The unemployment is actually going down, with now over 8 million employed workers, and we have almost no one suffering from lockdowns today. We have tried to make a lot of direct payments to individuals, and this is what you see at the very bottom here. The first withdrawal was at $1.7 billion, which is 0.5 GDP points. But so far, now that we're at the fourth withdrawal, we have virtually 10 times that initial amount of direct payments. And so there are a lot of direct payments going out. Therefore, we believe that this is not a favorable policy. What we need to do is keep the savings for pensions in pension funds and to not continue to draw down on those resources. If we had been able to provide more assistance in the first withdrawal, we may have been able to avoid this policy later on. But we are where we are, and what we're seeing is that there have been sharp declines in savings for pensions. As I said before, went from 80% of GDP to 60% of GDP, which has very varied implications. One of the first cons of implications is the interest rates sharply increasing. That is what we see on the left. We see interest rates in Chile in red compared to the US and the Eurozone. We see that in the two latter ones, interest rates have been fairly low, but in Chile, it has gone up. Now, the reason may seem obvious. As available savings have gone down, there are fewer funds available, therefore, rates need to go up. This is what we're seeing in mortgage rates markets. We can see how low the interest rate for mortgages was in Chile up through midpoint this year. We're at about 2.5%. But as withdrawals have gone up, interest rates for home loans is now close to 3.5%. This was as of September 2021. At this point, we're close to 5% in those rates, or close to 6% in some cases, which is very different from what we see in the US, where there was an initial increase in those rates, but then it remained stable. This means that as we continue to withdraw these funds, those who suffer the most ends up being the same group who suffered at first. The individuals who no longer have the same ability to buy a home or to find a different place to find better opportunities. This also has an impact in taxes, because as individuals have fewer and lower self-financed pensions, that will mean that there will be an increased expenditure from taxes in solidarity pensions. In this model here, we saw that we're going to need by 2054 rather, close to $8.8 billion for that situation to compensate. These are very significant amounts that all will fall on the public coffers. I mentioned before what was happening with the fourth withdrawal, but right now we need to also go back to what happened in previous withdrawals, the first in blue all the way up to the fourth in fuchsia, as you see at the top. This has a strong impact on the government's finances, and it also means that the funds that could have been used for education or healthcare are going to need to be appropriated for the solidarity pensions, which creates a public finances stress level that is much higher than what was desired. Given these withdrawals, we've seen a contraction of financial markets, and this has had an impact on a number of different assets. The exchange rate has significantly changed. This was from the moment that the first withdrawal was passed all the way through the fourth withdrawal. And as it goes through the legislative process, the Chilean stock market in dollars fell almost 4%, and sovereign bonds is in Chile facing some of the highest increases in interest rate. We always believe that there needed to be a major self or an individual savings pillar. In Chile, this had a significant impact in pensions going forward. But when these shocking events take place, like pandemics, there is a new opportunity to potentially withdraw those funds. And unfortunately, once we open that door, it's very difficult to close it back up. In Chile, we're talking about close to 30% of funds. That has created more liquidity on the one hand, that has led to higher inflation, which means that the central bank needs to intervene aggressively to control interest rates. That increases rates not only for the central bank, but also in the mortgage sector. And it also pushes investors away and has also led to a significant impact in the public coffers. This is leading to a considerable decrease in pensions. That also means that there are individuals who are retiring without anything in their accounts, which again has major implications for pensions in the future. As I said before, this also affects mortgage rates, which means that people are seeing home loans as an increasingly expensive option, especially now compared to some time in the past when someone in the middle class could buy, say, for example, a home for 220,000 pesos. But we believe that this is going to have an increased impact where that could be 5% higher. And the impact that we're actually seeing now compared to what we may be seeing may underestimate what is coming. And so, with this background, I have a few final thoughts. I believe that we need to think about the pension system and the different pillars, the government funded, the mandatory pillar, and the solidarity pillar. But we need to also think about how to better prepare for these significant high stress events like a pandemic, which can lead to these mandatory savings funds to start to be drawn down on. And this keeps officials from being able to improve pensions. In order to improve pensions, there has to be an increase in solidarity pillars, in coverage, and in amounts in order to cushion the blow. What this means is that there are going to be more fiscal and tax steps needed, but at the same time, the individual contributions and savings need to be addressed. And we need to look at how collective and individual action can be taken to improve this. This is all in addition to the effort that is needed for promoting more formal work. I think that given what is happening right now with those withdrawals, and we've seen this in other countries like Peru and others, sometimes it may be required that we find ways to increase individual savings. I think there's a long road ahead of us in Latin America when it comes to pensions. One of the aspects we need to think about is how, in a future crisis, how can the individual savings be maintained and not decreased? Thank you very much. And I do believe that this is going to be a major issue that we need to address going forward. Great. Thank you very much. Following these very interesting closing remarks from the minister, we're going to fully bring to a close our event. We'll turn it over to Elio Sanchez, who represents EOS. And also, we thank representatives from the other organizers. Elio? Thank you very much, Diego. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have attended this event and joined us virtually for these last 3 days, great afternoon and good evening to you all. As the International Association of Pension Fund Supervisors, or EOS, I would like to thank you all for the interest you have shown in this 9th edition of the Global Pension Program. Before getting into some of the highlights on this program and how it has gone for the last few days, I would like to mention a few key elements, and this has to do with what IOS has in store. IOS brings together the different regulators for pension systems from countries like Chile and Colombia, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Mexico, Panama, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay. Our mission, so everyone knows, is to strengthen and increase regulation and supervision of pension systems based on individual savings using international standards as a benchmark, which we have applied in our systems and to the relevant processes by also taking into account all of the elements I've mentioned. From where IOS is standing, in addition to having had really interesting and important issues discussed during this event, they need to be considered to improve our pension systems, and they are fully in line with our fundamental goal, which is the cross-fertilization of knowledge, of using best international practices, and of course, increasing pension education and improving the culture. We have talked about the important events taking place in a number of different countries, particularly in this current context we're experiencing, and the challenges and opportunities in developing and expanding these pension systems that includes longevity and coverage. That was an important introduction for the sections that followed. And we saw that we were able to discuss issues that we at IOS have also been discussing. These include behavioral economics, and we heard some very interesting points throughout the event. Discussing ESG as well, and their role in investment reminds us that investing in investment funds and pension funds in our systems shouldn't only be seen through a lens of return, but also understanding that that could play a key role in how we take better care of our societies. In talking about digital technologies, we have seen the important and interesting potential tools that we can have to improve customer service. And during this last session today, I was very pleased to hear from the Dominican Republic, which is a distinguished member of AOS, and which helped us hear about the pension system and how it was developed. And then we heard additional information on customer service from other parts of the region. Now, last but certainly not least, we were able to hear very interesting issues discussed. These are issues of interest for regulators and other players. For all of those of us who have been in this sector, we know that policies and all the tension and stress all coexist, and there are a number of challenges that need to be addressed. We have heard insights from the presenters on the major debates and discussions within the pension system, but also heard about the additional approaches and the holistic view we should take in addressing all of this. Now, before closing, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you all to visit our website, where you will be able to find a lot more information and detail regarding our countries. Once again, thank you very much. And once again, it has been my honor to provide these remarks before such a distinguished audience. Thank you. Thank you very much, Waldo. Hello, everyone. And, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening. I know that we have everyone from different parts of the world. Now, I've been with the Global Pensions Program since 2015, when this program was first held in Mexico. Now, of course, we know how important the impact of this program has been in the region. That has been increasing. But I know that usually the last day is the most fun, but I wasn't able to have the kinds of side conversations I used to be able to have in person. That being said, we have seen an incredibly successful event. On the first day, the Vice President of Sectors and Knowledge of the IDB, Benigno Lopez, mentioned that we are experiencing both exciting and challenging times to get involved in pensions in Latin America and the Caribbean. Over the last 3 days, we've been able to see that pensions are not going to become, but rather are already a central pillar in social and economic policy in the region. Over the last 3 days, we have discussed the main challenges that as a region we face: demographic shift, pension system design, gender equity, digital transformation, the pandemic's impact on pension systems, including environmental issues and political economy. Those are just some of the many challenging issues we've been able to review over the last 3 days. The way these challenges are tackled is going to have major economic, fiscal, and social impacts on the region. The way that we can improve things today will shape the future. And the Plaque Network works on bolstering pension systems throughout the entire region in order to address an aging population in a way that is timely and appropriate. That is one of the main challenges we have as the IDB, as the social sector, and of those of us who work in this sector. On behalf of the IDB, the PLAC Network, the International Organization of Pension Fund Supervisors, AOS, the London School of Economics, Novaster, and BOA. I'd like to thank you all for being with us for this 9th edition of the Global Pensions Program. There's no doubt in my mind, we'll see you again in 2022. Now, of course, before we leave, I need to thank everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this a reality. We know that getting this event underway is part of a long road, but it is a long road that we learn a great deal from. So I'd like to thank Laura, Carolina, Katerina, Olga, Sol, Calypsa, Diego, Christina, and Paulina for making this 9th edition of the Global Pensions Program a reality. We'll see you next time for the 10th edition. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Waldo. I believe that this brings us to the end. I know that Novaster started on this journey about 4 years ago. We could not have imagined that 9 years later, we would be here and would have such illustrious panels or travel companions with IOS and IDB and Platt Network and the London School of Economics. This has all been a great journey, and we've seen your loyalty year after year by continuing to contact us, sending us your comments and your suggestions and any feedback that can improve this program. All of that can help us reach our goal, which is to bring more education and more of what is happening in research into pension systems to improve them. Novaster has been working on this for a number of years in order to improve the lives of the elderly and to ensure that they can enjoy the pensions they deserve after a full life of work. We have been trying to make sure that people overall are making better decisions for their financial health, in particular, as well as other colleagues have already mentioned. We would also love to have you visit our website. You have that both in the messages we've received since the start of this. You also have that in the agenda. But above and beyond that, and speaking personally, as part of the academic research division of this program, I have had a fantastic experience over the last 9 years and feel very fortunate to have this opportunity to thank you for your unrelenting participation over the course of these years. Of course, welcome you all and invite you to join us for the 10th anniversary, for the 10th edition of the Global Pensions Program, where we will get together once again so that together we can try to all learn and improve lives, which is the goal that we have all set for ourselves. Before you can formally catch sight of the team that has put this together, I know that Waldo didn't mention his own name, but I do want to include him to the long list of wonderful team players who helped us get here. One final logistical item to discuss. We are going to be sending a survey out to everyone. We would greatly appreciate it if you could fill that. And in return, we will be able to give you a digital certification for your participation. We certainly look forward to getting your feedback because I can assure you it really does help improve our work. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your attendance. We'll see you for the 10th edition. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, your evening, or your night. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.